your race, or the gender with which you identify. You are welcome here regardless of your income, your educational level, your religion, or your position in society. You are welcome here regardless of who you love or who you vote for. You are welcome here regardless of the losses you have suffered, the regrets that burden you, or the mistakes you have made. In this beloved community, we support each other in the sacred task of becoming, celebrate the transcending mystery of life, and rely on the transforming power of love. In this community, we honor and revere the words of the great teachers such as Jesus, the Buddha, and Confucius. It is, however, the task of every UU to be their own Buddha, their own Jesus, their own Confucius. It is our work as a community to walk with each other along the spiritual pathways that lead towards happiness, compassion, and life fully lived. And while we are a safe harbor where there is solace and healing, we are also a launching pad from which we are propelled into the tumult of life to live courageously, justly, and lovingly. In this sacred place, we create the structures that lift up the downtrodden, set the captives free, and heal the brokenhearted. Here we have learned that to be fully human is to be fully divine, and that with a little help from our friends, we can each tell our own unique stories. So our announcements today, are there any that anyone would like to bring forward? Do we have oh, yes, I'm sorry. Please do the Zoom.
It's actually a rather full crowd in-house for the weather, so welcome all. And to those on Zoom, we have Charles, Nan, Linda, June, and we also have Joan and Doug, and an unknown Zoom user. So thank you all.
For playing that for us, Beth. And now, Joanne Krettek will speak to us about leadership opportunities here at BUUF.
So you've probably figured out by now that November is kind of Volunteer Appreciation Month at BUUF. We're really trying to show appreciation for our volunteers, and we appreciate everyone who helps with whatever it is, whether it's the building and grounds or teaching an RE class. But we wanted to give special mention to our volunteers. Volunteer leaders today. So I put on some of the chairs you might see in front of you. We have, of course, we need leaders. We can't have meetings without leaders that are willing to call them and type up minutes and arrange for people to be here when we need them here to help out with some activity. So I want to start with our board, even though they're towards the bottom. We're so fortunate to have Joan Guilfoyle as our president, Dennis Higdon, who recently accepted the VP role through, I think, the end of June, Leah McCoskey as our secretary, Dick Barrett as our treasurer, and then our two board trustees, Vicki Thomas and Patrice Grant, and our board youth advisor, Silas Lorenz. Also very thankful that Jim Fuller is volunteering as bookkeeper. That is a big job and very, very important for us. And then we have a list of our staff, our paid staff, who also volunteer quite a bit. Brett and Reverend Jim and Beth and Leanne and Beth again. Because she does lots of roles. She's also at the top here. So let's go to the top. And the committee chairs are extremely important. Again, they're calling the meetings, they're getting jobs done here. Beth is also in charge of childcare. If you know anyone who might be a good childcare worker when we need one, Beth would be the one to talk to. Vicki is in charge of arranging volunteers to clean the building. And then Beth again is endowment committee chair. And Diane and Harvey are in charge of Green Sanctuary. Harvey recently took on the big role of membership committee chair. They do lots of things, plan our special events and our in-gathering ceremonies, that type of thing. And I think Harvey might be looking for more members of his committee. Is that true? Yes, all right. So this is helpful to know who's in charge of what. So if you want to volunteer, you know who to go to. Nominations and leadership development, that's actually one of the elected committees like endowment, and that's Liz Goodwin and myself. Safe congregation, again, Beth, and I think Beth may be the only member of that team. Yeah, so if anyone's interested in the safety of the congregation, especially the children, Beth could use more members. Social justice, Nancy and Clark Gilpin. Stewardship, Patrice, thankfully, recently agreed to co-chair, but I'll bet you Patrice wouldn't mind another chair to help her with stewardship this year. And Sunday services and worship is me, and welcoming congregation is Brett. I would guess everybody who is a committee chair would love to have your input if you're interested in joining any of these committees. In addition, we have a few committees that aren't active because we don't have a chair. We have a caring, we'd like to have a caring committee that would look out when we have a member who's ill or needs special care, maybe arrange to bring him dinners or help with any problems with their building, repairs, that type of thing. We do have volunteers who help from time to time, but no one to organize that effort. Facilities and grounds, well, we know Harvey and Jim Fuller and Charles Long are very active on taking care of our facilities and grounds. But again, it'd be great to have somebody who would coordinate those efforts. And then fundraising and marketing. So if you are interested, those are the openings. But in general, we just want to really recognize our leaders because they perform a huge function and we couldn't even have these services without them. So thank you everyone who performs the leadership function at BUUF.
Yeah, thank you all for for everybody who comes and for everybody who serves on a committee or some other function. I have to say that for a small congregation, we do an awful lot in our community. So I'm very proud of what we do and who we are. Okay, so now we have a real treat. I ask. Actually, we got to blame Joan Guilfoyle for this because she had the idea that having a volunteer position in the church is also a spiritual discipline, and then she got a hip replaced and she can't be here today, but she is going to be, I hope, delivering that message next Sunday. But we are also lucky to have another very interesting person with us today, Rachel Reed. Who all of you know. She will be sharing with you her notion of volunteerism. So come on up, Rachel.
Hello. Tried to keep this short. I'm not sure if I succeeded. Because when Jim asked me to speak on the spirituality of volunteerism, I had to reflect on how I feel about volunteering today is actually deeply tied to a single experience I had with my mother from over 20 years ago. As a disturbingly jaded, cynical child, I didn't volunteer, I was voluntold. Volunteering seemed to be a waste of time on an individual level, fighting against entropy. No matter how many socks you gave, there were going to be bare feet. No matter how many pieces of trash you picked up in the park, someone was going to litter tomorrow. No matter how many people you fed, someone was going to go hungry. In fact, at this point in time, about 23 years ago, my mother was working as a reporter for 3 local papers, copywriter for 2 online magazines, and selling her antique glass collection piece by piece at a local resale shop, trying to make sure we weren't the someone's going hungry. During this time, my mother ended up meeting a lady I'll call Susan at the shelter while doing a piece on the failings of the public transportation system in our area. Susan was a former longtime homemaker who was fleeing an abusive marriage with absolutely nothing and desperately needed a job, any job, but lack of reliable transportation was making that impossible. I'm sure you guys see where this is going. My mother started giving rides to not just Susan, but to several other people that she also met during the course of writing the story for the newspaper, with me stuck in the back seat. One day, I had to ask why. Why is she doing this? She can't solve the public transit crisis by herself, and we were in a position where we had just gone and turned in cans for the deposit at the store to get gas money until the next check came in. The answer I got actually took me aback. My lapsed Catholic mother actually brought Jesus into it. And you might know the story. She was not usually the type to quote gospel. Most people here probably know the story she tried to tell me at the time. The story of the poor widow's offering, the one where Jesus lauds a poor widow for giving all she had in comparison to the wealthy who only gave a portion of their wealth. As a child who knew everything, I was not receptive to this answer. And I told her that if we were going to get into moral fables, I could direct her to Aesop's, The Ant and the Grasshopper. The conversation went nowhere good from there, and I think I may actually still owe her an apology. Okay, but now 20 years and change later, a mother myself, worried about the state of the world for my own children, I think I understand what she was trying to tell me. We didn't have much, but we did have a car we could use to help when others didn't. And she did help. She may not have been able to change the system, but she made a real noticeable difference in several people's lives, just being the change she wanted to see in the world. Susan, we kept in touch with her for a little bit afterwards. Susan was able to get to interviews. Then she was able to get a job. And then she was able to get a car, which led to her being then able to keep her job and get an apartment. And then she was able to get her daughter back in a safe environment. The world may be broken, but we can build the world, the community we want to live in for ourselves and others with our own actions. Helping is not a zero-sum game. No matter what you have to give, every little bit helps. That's my thought on the spirituality of volunteerism.
Thank you, Rachel. That was quite lovely. Actually reminded me of my childhood story. I had a lot of my parents and grandparents were heavy into church, and every Sunday I was given 2 dimes and a nickel. They were my allowance for the week, and I was required to give 1 dime into the collection plate every Sunday, which I soon discovered that no one was really paying much attention to how much I was giving, so I started dropping the nickel in instead of the dime. And but I'm afraid that moral failing of mine led to even a deeper kind of moral failing. When I one night we had these piggy banks. When I was a kid, my brother had one, and they were lined up on our counter in our bedroom. And I knew that if I took a knife and I could quietly work my brother's nickels and dimes out. So, but the thing is that I had to do it in the dark, and unfortunately, when I put things back, I put the money in the wrong bank. I put it in my brother's bank, and I didn't dare tell my parents, but I did tell my grandma, who often had a sympathetic ear, and I still remember her response to this day. Well, that's what you get when you try to cheat God. So, there. Never did get that money back. Anyway, thank you, Rachel. That was a very lovely presentation. So there are several things I want this sermon to do. First, I wanted to entice those of you who have been feeling an internal nudge to take one of the openings available on one of the BUUF committees that do the administrative and ministry work of our fellowship. That is to take the leap and volunteer. Second, I want to talk about the spiritual opportunity that comes with taking a volunteer position in a religious institution. And third, I would want to talk a bit about mindfulness, my preferred spiritual discipline, as being a very helpful kind of spirituality for dealing with the sometimes strenuous requirements for being successful in doing the work of the fellowship and just in life in general. So there's a story about the Buddha that I especially like. One day, as the Buddha was teaching to a group of the interested, a fellow from the back of the crowd walked up and spat in the Buddha's face. The Buddha carefully wiped his face and said to the man, "Thank you. I had wondered if I could still get angry." When one decides to take a paid or a volunteer position in church or fellowship, it will always be to mixed reviews. For instance, last Sunday, I received opinions on my sermons that ranged from all the way from "that was brilliant" to "I wish your messages were more positive and upbeat." The point being that when one volunteers, one is taking a risk. Even the Buddha had a few detractors, as we saw in that story. The rewards, however, greatly outweigh the negatives. The greatest reward is, of course, that you are doing something that is important, has lasting effect, and sustains the soul. Another reward might be adopting a spiritual practice or deepening one you already are involved in that deals with the ups and downs of volunteering. I, for several decades, have practiced mindfulness. Mindfulness is giving attention to what is occurring in one's psyche or in one's mind space. I like to picture my mind space as a high school auditorium. The lighted stage is where different dynamics of my psyche appear, while out in the auditorium, seated in the darkness, are all the other possible psychological elements of my mind, each waiting to take its turn on the stage. Terence, the 2nd century BCE Roman poet, said, "Nothing human is alien to me." So my auditorium, as is yours, has quite a few seats. The elements in our auditoriums include emotions, thoughts, dreams, memories, elements of cultural programming, creative impulse, imaginings, the archetypes in all their different disguises, ideas of the self, the impulse to evil, the impulse to love, transcending insight, and aha realizations. We all carry a large internal crowd within us. Before I go on, I should mention that there are many kinds of spirituality: prayer, meditation, mindfulness, fasting, pilgrimage, journaling, exercise, running, martial arts, Sufism, which includes wearing a wool shirt and whirling like a dervish, consuming hallucinatory substances, and self-flagellation, to name a few. Are there any self-flagellators in here today? Anybody? No? Okay. Self-flagellation, I was going to actually play a video, but it's bad. So anyway, self-flagellation, still practiced by some Catholics, is when one whips oneself with a steel-tipped whip to drive out desire and evil thoughts. I would show you a video of self-flagellation, but it is not pretty. I'm sure you can imagine the bloody scene. Another question: is anyone here a self-flagellator of the inner self? Okay, we have a few. This is a trick question. Everyone is from time to time an inner self-flagellator. Almost everyone occasionally whips themselves into submission by dosing themselves with anxiety or shame. So now I'll ask you, anybody in here a self-flagellator? Okay, yeah, most of us are. Mindfulness is my preferred mode of spirituality. Paying attention to what happens in the mind makes all of life a spiritual discipline. This can be very helpful for anyone who is employed, married, has a disability, is raising kids, doing church work, or is involved in politics. So basically, everyone. Before I go any further, I feel I need to contrast mindfulness with meditation. In meditation, one learns to focus on the stream of consciousness, but not identify with it. Meditation, for some, is a wonderful technique for becoming a calmer, more resilient person who may have greater access to the transcending dimension. As I mentioned earlier, I prefer the rough and tumble spirituality of mindfulness, which is focusing on and learning from the parts of myself that have taken the stage in the high school auditorium of my mind. Mindfulness is a bit more harrowing, but I think more rewarding and helpful, at least for me, when it comes to attaining a feeling of mastery of life. In the practice of mindfulness, one is more likely to uncover and name one's social programming, discover one's true passions, and learn how to be compassionate with yourself and others. And that is my opinion. I'm sure that many meditators would disagree. Following are a couple examples of how mindfulness has been helpful for me. Some decades ago, I was serving a small United Methodist church in Jay County in Indiana. It was my practice there to, once a quarter, visit the home of every parishioner. This is what people expected, and I was happy to oblige. I've always enjoyed seeing how people live and learning how they find joy and meaning amidst the struggles and challenges involved in living their lives. To tell the truth, I am a bit in awe of our species. What a monumental task it is to really be human, to live courageously in the face of our frailties and the certain knowledge of our own impending deaths. On one occasion, I visited an older woman on a sunny spring morning. It was one of those perfect kinds of days: sun shining, birds singing, trees budding, everything was turning green. There were bright yellow crocuses poking up in the front yard. When my parishioner met me at the door, she was not in a spring kind of mood. In fact, she was quite angry. After offering me the obligatory cookies, she launched into a bit of a tirade, saying, "You are not doing a very good job as our pastor, and your sermons are boring and meaningless." She continued, "Why don't you try preaching something from the Bible for a change?" I reminded her that I preach from the Christian lectionary every Sunday, which covers the entire Bible every 3 years. And this is when anger made its appearance on the stage of my mind. I really wanted to let her have it. It's also when I remembered from my own mindfulness work that when anger appears on the stage, it is usually fear in disguise. It occurred to me that just as my anger was hiding my fear of failure, that Norma's anger might be a disguise for her fear. I said, "Norma, I think that my preaching is not really what is on your mind." And she broke into tears. The day before, her husband had been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. We were able to talk about real things then, like what would life be like when she was alone in her big farmhouse, and how was she going to tell her kids and grandkids that their dad and grandpa had only a few months to live. On another of my visits during my time at that parish, I stopped by the farm of a couple, both in their 40s, who ran a 50-cow milking operation. Milking cows. Anybody milking cows? Ever milk cows as part of their life? Okay, you guys. Was it like a big operation or a little operation? A little? Okay. Did you personally know the name of your cows? Know the name of every one of your cows? Yeah. Yeah. Well, we named our cows. So. There you go. Okay, milking cows is a tremendously labor-intensive operation. When I got there, it was 10 o'clock in the morning, and Helen was alone in the barn finishing up the morning milking. I have milked a few cows in my time, and I knew that 10 o'clock was much later than a morning milking should run. When I queried Helen, she informed me that she had been for several weeks doing all the milking and associated chores by herself, and that her husband had been laying in bed and would not get up to milk and take care of the cows. She was doing all the work. I felt a great deal of sympathy for her. She felt abandoned by her husband and was fearful that she would lose her marriage and eventually the farm. I sat with her on some hay bales with her as she wept in a mixture of despair, anger, and anxiety. This is when my mischievous, playful self showed up on the stage of my psyche. I have learned to honor this presence, but this did not seem like the time for mischief. I decided, however, to take a chance and trust my inner rascal. I said in a very solemn tone, "Helen, when I find myself in a really hard situation, I like to say 3 little words to myself that always seem to help." She ventured, "Are the 3 words God loves me?" I said, "No, they are shit, shit, shit." Anyone else have that spiritual practice here? No. Okay. You cannot get this at the Baptist church, so. So it turned out they were the right words. Helen, a straight-laced, rural, conservative Christian woman, started a giggle that turned into laughter. Her rascal came out to play with mine. She playfully imagined setting her house on fire as her husband lay in bed, as a way to rouse him from her torpor. It also turned out that her husband had lost interest in more than the farm. She theorized that it would be like what it would be like to seduce the young manager of the local feed mill. After our laugh, we acknowledged that hard times are a part of every life, that there was a way through their current difficulties. I assured her that the church would be there for her and her husband. In the ensuing days, we were able to get Helen's husband in to see a doctor. He was prescribed medication for depression, and in a few weeks regained his interest in farming. In the interim, a retired farmer from another UMC church was able to help with some of the milking chores. Last I heard, they did not lose their farm or their marriage, though there is no word on the feed mill manager. By way of footnote, in all fairness, I have had some breathtaking failures as a minister. When I think of some of my more extravagant failures, I usually end up, as I mentioned earlier, involving myself in a little inner self-flagellation, tying myself to my inner whipping post and flogging myself with shame, which is also a spiritual discipline. It is just not a very helpful one, unless, of course, you want to beat yourself into submission to your cultural programming. It is a very effective way of clipping your spiritual wings. End footnote. The point I'm trying to make with these stories is that taking a community position in this fellowship or working for justice in the wider community, and thereby going deeper into the life of this fellowship, will almost certainly bring great reward and great spiritual challenge. It will definitely be a risk. The payoff, however, is big. You may get to do some good for the world, and you will almost certainly find plenty of spiritual opportunity for growth. I was talking with my brother a couple days ago. He is newly retired from farming. He built a new house and bought a new car, and now he tells me that after a life of hard work, he is just going to sit back and let life pass by. I said, too bad life doesn't work that way. And I continued, life is like a bass drum in the back of your psyche, beating out a rhythm that calls you to jump in and take the risk of being really fully alive. Follow the drumbeat of your life and you'll live. Turn a deaf ear and you will just be waiting around to die. And then I added, while you're at it, you should find yourself a good woman. My brother, whose wife died 5 years ago from breast cancer, said, and just where am I going to find a good woman? I said, there are lots of nice women. I said, rather, you are going to have to start going to church again. I said, there are lots of nice women there who would be happy to couple up with a not too grotesquely deformed, moderately wealthy, 70-something retired farmer. I tell this anecdote because it is about a great truth of life. Life is meant to be used up. If you throw yourself into life and take the risk of joining the fray, you will live until you die. Play it safe, hold yourself back, and you may already be as good as dead. There will always be those life-denying voices within that tell you to keep your place, don't stick your neck out, and no one wants to hear your opinion. Or what makes you think that you are worthy of taking a stand, writing a book, organizing a church program, or becoming president of the congregation? These are voices of our social programming. Beneath these voices is the drumbeat of life, calling you to live. The bottom line is this: the drumbeat of life is calling you to sign up for a committee, speak from this pulpit, or work in the wider community for peace and justice. Take a chance and put yourself out there. You have nothing to lose. Even if you fail spectacularly, you will still be alive. And let's take a moment to meditate. And amen. And now for our closing hymn.
Go, lifted up, love, bless your way. Moonlight, starlight, guide your journey into peace and the brightness of day.
Moonlight, starlight, guide
Oh, that was beautiful, Beth. Thank you. Before we have our chalice extinguishers come up, I'd just like to say thank you to everyone who took part in the service today. Joanne for her inspirational talk on volunteerism, and Rachel for her very insightful and very interesting talk on the spirituality of volunteerism, and for Judy for stepping in on the piano, and for Gloria for bringing us a cake, so which we can have a piece of out there. I'd also like to thank Chris for coming today. Chris, could you raise your hand? Chris is a visitor. Please go by and say hi to him. Tell him your life story if you like to. I'm sure he'd like to hear it. Yeah. So anyway, Chris, it's good to have you with us today. So Rachel, would you come forward and light our chalice for us today? Extinguish our chalice, rather. Because we could do with this all over again.
As we extinguish this flame, let us carry its warmth forward in our hearts and in our deeds until we meet again.
Amen. Thank you. And now let's form our circle and sing our Go in Peace benediction. Now, one thing I'd like to say is I really would appreciate it. I notice that we have some people who are swears and some people who are not swears. And we also have some people who are, when it says make eye contact, they make eye contact, and others don't. But I'd just like to try, today, I give you permission to sway and to make eye contact. And follow Harvey, he's our head swear.